Nobody in that saloon could have imagined that the most dangerous man in the Old West was sitting there in silence, drinking cheap whiskey, enduring humiliations without saying a single word, quiet, still, as if all the violence around him was just background noise, until his silence began to weigh heavy, and that weight became a death sentence. The saloon, the Red Serpent, boiled with drunken laughter and the thick smoke of cigars hanging in the air like a shroud. It was the year 1883, and the town of Dust Creek lived under the terror of a single gang. The men of Jack Coyote Morrison controlled every corner, every business, every drop of whiskey that was served. Wherever they went, fear followed them like a shadow that never left. But that night, something broke the routine, something that would change everything forever. At the last table, hunched over his glass, sat a man who did not fit in. Elias Cordell, 72 years old, hair white as the snow from the northern mountains, skin weathered by decades of relentless sun, hands steady despite his advanced age. Nobody understood what an old man like that was doing in a place like this. Jack Morrison looked at him with contempt. An old man, an error of time, he thought to himself. He approached slowly while the other gunmen laughed, knowing what was coming next. He grabbed the old man's bottle of whiskey and emptied it over his hat. "Welcome to hell, grandfather. I am the one who gives orders here." Elias did not answer. He continued staring at his empty glass, calm, as if the insult did not exist. The silence lasted a few seconds, but it felt eternal. There was something strange about this man, something contained like a storm, waiting for the exact moment to unleash itself. One of the gunmen whispered, "That old man has a really strange look in his eyes, brother." Morrison pushed the table forward. The glass fell and shattered into pieces. Even so, the old man did not move. He only lifted his gaze for an instant. A calm but frozen look. A look that did not belong to just any cowboy. For a moment, Jack Morrison doubted himself. But before you discover how a 72-year-old man became the nightmare of 20 gunmen, give us a like, subscribe, and leave in the comments what country you are listening from. Mexico, Spain, Argentina. I would love to know. Now prepare yourself, because what Elias Cordell is about to unleash in Dust Creek is not just revenge. It is a death sentence written with gunpowder and blood. Dust Creek was a town forgotten by God and remembered only by the devil himself. 3 dirt streets, a bank, a church without a pastor, and a saloon that never closed its doors. The law had passed through there years ago, but it never stayed. It was outlaw territory, and Jack Coyote Morrison was its uncrowned king. Morrison and his men arrived 2 years earlier, burned down the sheriff's office, and hanged the mayor from the telegraph post in the center of town. Since then, nobody dared to challenge them. They collected illegal taxes, stole cattle, violated women without consequence. The town breathed fear with every passing day. Elias Cordell arrived on Tuesday's stagecoach, without luggage, without visible weapons, only an old satchel and a worn hat. He paid for a room at the widow McAllister's boarding house with worn silver coins. He did not speak to anyone. He did not ask anything. He only observed with those grey eyes that seemed to see through people. The widow, curious by nature, asked him where he came from. From far away, Elias answered with a hoarse voice, from a place that no longer exists. That first night, Elias dined alone in the saloon. He ordered whiskey and dried meat. Morrison's men were there playing poker, shouting, breaking bottles against the walls. One of them, a man called Snake Dawson, noticed the old man sitting in the corner. "Look, boys, we have fresh meat." He approached staggering, clearly drunk. He knocked Elias's hat off with a slap. "Here, old men do not last long, grandfather. Did you come here to die?" Elias chewed slowly. He did not lift his gaze, only responded with glacial calm. "I came to remember." Snake laughed loudly. "Remember what? How it feels to be alive. The silence fell for a second. Snake frowned, confused. Then he spat on Elias's plate and returned to his table among loud laughter. The old man cleaned the spit with his sleeve, finished eating, left some coins on the table and left in silence. But before crossing the door, he stopped. He looked towards the table of the gunman. His gaze stopped on each face, memorizing them one by one, as if he was making a mental list. Outside, under the yellow light of the oil lamps, a cold wind swept through the deserted street. The wooden doors creaked, and somewhere in the past the name Elias Cordell had meant something terrible, something that soon everyone would remember. The boarding house of Widow McAllister smelled of soap and old wood. Elias climbed the stairs slowly, each step measured, as if each movement reminded him of an ancient discipline. His room was simple, a bed, a chair, a window that looked out onto the main street. He sat on the bed and took out from his satchel the only valuable thing he carried, a yellowed photograph. In it, a young man in a Confederate uniform, serious, with a recent scar on his cheek. By his side, a beautiful woman holding a small girl with bright eyes. Elias ran his finger over the woman's face. His eyes became moist, but he did not cry. It had been decades since he had cried. The last time was in 1869, when he found his house burned down and the bodies of his wife and daughter buried under the ashes. The responsible ones were a band of deserters from the north who looted ranches on the frontier. Elias tracked them for 2 years, found them one by one across 3 states. None died quickly, and when he finished, when the last man stopped screaming, Elias Cordell disappeared from the face of the earth. He became legend, the ghost of blood, they called him. The gunman who never missed, who killed without compassion, who left only silence and death in his wake. But after the massacre, Elias retired, hid in the mountains, lived as a hermit, tried to forget the taste of revenge. Until 3 weeks ago. A traveler arrived at his cabin half dead, asking for water. Before dying in his arms, he told him about Dust Creek, about Morrison and his men, and mentioned a name that froze Elias's blood. Thomas the Raven Garrett, the only man who escaped his revenge 15 years ago, the one who planned the attack on his family, the one who ordered his house burned while they slept inside. And now Thomas Garrett was the second in command of Jack Morrison. Elias put away the photograph, took off his boots and lay down fully dressed. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from muscle memory. His fingers remembered the weight of a revolver, the exact pressure of the trigger, the recoil, the sound of a life ending. Outside, the laughter from the saloon continued, but in that dark room, the ghost of blood had awakened, and the town of Dust Creek did not know that it had just signed its death sentence. The morning arrived with a brutal sun that turned the streets into mirrors of dust. Elias woke before dawn, as he always did. He stretched his body with precise movements, slow but deliberate. Each joint protested but obeyed. He went down to the kitchen where Widow McAllister was preparing coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Cordell. Did you sleep well?" "I never sleep well, Mom, but I survived another night." The widow served him black coffee and bread. While he ate, he observed through the window Morrison's men were already on the street collecting their taxes from the merchants. One of them struck an old Chinese man who sold remedies. The man fell to the ground. Nobody intervened. Elias squeezed the cup with force. The widow noticed the change in his gaze. "Do not get involved, Mr. Cordell. Those men kill for fun." "I know," the old man responded without looking away. "I used to do it too." The widow turned pale. She did not ask more questions. Elias went out to the street. The sun hit his face like a hammer. He walked slowly towards the market, where the old Chinese man was still on the ground, bleeding from his mouth. The gunman who hit him was laughing with his companions. Elias knelt beside the merchant, helped him to stand up. The man murmured in his language, scared. "Calm down," Elias said. "It is over now." The gunman, a large type called Bull, approached furious. "Hey, old man, that Chinese man owes me respect, and you are meddling where you are not called." Elias straightened up slowly, his back cracked. He looked at Bull directly in the eyes. "That man does not owe you anything, and I even less." Bull laughed, pulled out his revolver, and pointed it at Elias's face. "Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" "Yes," Elias responded with a serene voice, "with a dead man." Bull frowned. He did not understand. But the older men of the town, those who still remembered the stories, felt a chill run down their spines. One of them, a drunk called Pete, whispered with a trembling voice, "Good Lord, that old man, that scar on his cheek, is it him?" Bull's revolver continued pointing. Elias did not move, he only waited. And in the saloon, on the other side of the street, Thomas the Raven Garrett looked out the window and recognized that face. His past had just found him. Thomas Garrett dropped the glass of whiskey. The crystal shattered against the saloon floor, but he did not notice. His eyes were fixed on the old man in the street, on that scar in the shape of a half-moon on his left cheek. "It cannot be," he murmured. "We killed him. We left him bleeding in the desert." But they had not, and Thomas knew it deep in his soul. 15 years ago, after burning down the Cordell house, the gang separated. Thomas heard the rumors afterwards. One by one, his companions were found dead. Some hanging from trees, others with bullets between their eyes, others bled out in alleyways, all except him. Thomas fled north, changed his name 3 times, joined different gangs until he met Jack Morrison and found a place to hide. But he always knew that someday that ghost would come for him. And now he was there, standing in the middle of the street like death itself. On the street, Bull continued pointing at Elias. Jack Morrison came out of the saloon, alerted by the sudden silence that had fallen over the town. He was a tall man of 30 years, smallpox scars on his face, eyes like extinguished coals. "What is happening here?" he asked with a hoarse voice. Bull answered without lowering his weapon. "This old man meddled where he should not have, boss." Morrison looked at Elias from top to bottom. He saw an unarmed old man, hunched over with worn clothes. "Are you crazy, old man? Do you want to die today?" Elias looked at him with that frozen calm that disarmed men. "I am not looking to die. I am looking for someone." "Who?" "Thomas Garrett. I know he is here." The air froze. Morrison frowned. Some of his men looked towards the saloon, where Thomas was still paralyzed at the window. "I do not know any Garrett," Morrison lied. "Yes, you know him," Elias said, "and he knows me." Thomas came out of the saloon slowly, his legs trembling. His right hand brushed the butt of his revolver, but he did not draw it. He was afraid, a fear he had not felt since he was young. "Elias Cordell," he said with a broken voice, "I thought you were dead. I was until I learned that you were still alive." Morrison looked at Thomas, confused. "Do you know this old man?" Thomas swallowed hard. "He is the ghost of blood." And in that instant the entire town understood who the unarmed old man really was, the man who had killed 30 men without losing a single duel. Jack Morrison let out a dry laugh that cut the silence. The ghost of blood, that tale of old drunken women. He turned towards Elias with contempt. "Look, grandfather, I do not know what stories they put in your head, but I am the one who gives orders here, and if you want Thomas, you are going to have to go through me and my 20 men." Elias did not look away from Thomas. It was as if Morrison did not exist. 20 men do not worry me. Call more if you want. I have killed for less." Morrison stopped laughing. There was something in the old man's voice, a cold certainty, a tranquility, that only men who have seen death up close so many times that it no longer impresses them have. Thomas took a step back. "Jack, listen to me. This man is real. I saw him kill 6 men in less than 10 seconds. He did not shoot. He executed them as if he knew exactly where each one was going to fall before pulling the trigger. You are paranoid, Morrison spat, but his hand went instinctively to his revolver. Elias spoke with a low voice, but everyone heard him. I am going to give you one chance, Morrison. Hand Thomas over to me. Let me finish what I started 15 years ago, and I will leave. You and your men continue living, continue controlling this town. Nobody has to die today. And if I refuse, then everyone dies one by one in the order that I choose, and Thomas will be the last just so he can see how his friends fall before him. Bull spat on the ground. This old man is crazy, boss. Let me blow his brains out right now. Morrison raised his hand, stopping him. He studied Elias carefully. He looked for fear, doubt, hesitation. He found nothing, only a frozen void in those grey eyes that seemed to look through him. You have until tomorrow at dawn to leave town, Morrison finally said. If you are still here, I will kill you myself. Elias nodded slowly. Tomorrow at dawn on the main street, you, me and Thomas, and may God have mercy on whoever survives. He turned around and walked back to the boarding house, leaving 20 armed gunmen watching him walk away without firing a single shot. Thomas let himself fall against the wall of the saloon, sweating profusely. We are dead, he whispered. We are all dead. And deep in his heart, Morrison began to fear that Thomas was right. The night fell over Dust Creek like a black blanket. The oil lamps barely illuminated the windows. The entire town whispered in fear. Some packed to leave before dawn. Others locked themselves in their houses praying to God. In the saloon, Morrison gathered his men around the largest table. Listen to me well. Tomorrow, that old man dies. I do not care if he was the ghost of blood or the devil himself. He is just an old man with old stories. We are 20, he is 1. The mathematics are on our side. But his voice did not sound as sure as his words suggested. Snake Dawson, nervous, asked, "And what if the stories are true? What if he really is that man?" Morrison gave him a punch that knocked him off his chair. There are no stories. There is only a stupid old man who is going to die tomorrow. Thomas was drinking in a corner, the bottle almost empty. He had not spoken in hours. The memories were drowning him. He remembered that night in 1869, the house in flames, the screams that still haunted his dreams, and afterwards, months later, finding his companions dead, each one with a mark, a silver bullet embedded in the forehead like a signature. He does not just come to kill me, Thomas murmured. He comes to make everyone who protects me suffer first. Morrison heard him. For the first time, he felt a knot in his stomach. In the boarding house, Elias dined in silence. Widow McAllister sat in front of him with concern in her eyes. Why do you do it? You are already old. You could live in peace what remains of your life. Elias looked at her with tired eyes. Peace is a luxury that I lost a long time ago, Ma'am. The only thing I have left is to finish what I started, and afterwards I can die peacefully. The widow sighed deeply. How many men have you killed in your life, Mr. Cordell? Elias stopped chewing. The question floated in the air like smoke. I stopped counting after 50. The silence was absolute. Elias finished his dinner, went up to his room, opened his satchel and took out something he had kept wrapped in old cloth for years. 2 Colt .45 revolvers engraved with the initials EC. The weapons shone as if he had cleaned them yesterday, although they had been stored for years. He loaded them with bullets that he himself had forged years ago. 6 in each cylinder, 12 bullets. Enough! Outside, the full moon illuminated the empty street, and the wind whispered like an omen. Tomorrow, Dust Creek would bathe in blood. The sun had not yet risen when Elias descended the boarding house stairs. He wore his 2 revolvers in their holsters, his hat pulled down to his eyebrows. His steps were firm, rhythmic, like those of a soldier marching towards his last battlefield. Widow McAllister was waiting for him with coffee already prepared. "You do not have to do this," she whispered with tears in her eyes. "Yes, I do," Elias responded. He took the coffee in one gulp, left some silver coins on the table. "If I do not return, this covers my room and my burial." He went out to the street. The town was deserted, the windows closed. Nobody wanted to be witness to what was coming. He walked to the center of the main street. He stopped in front of the saloon. The sun was beginning to peak on the horizon, staining the sky blood red. The doors of the saloon opened with a loud creak. Jack Morrison came out first, then Thomas Garrett, pale, trembling like a leaf, and behind them 18 men armed to the teeth, rifles, shotguns, revolvers, all pointing at a single old man standing alone. Morrison smiled. "Last chance, Cordell. Get on a horse and leave. You do not have to die today." Elias spat on the ground. "Lies! I have been dead for 15 years. Today I only finish the job." Morrison made a sign. His men dispersed, forming a semicircle around the old man. It was an execution. "Do you have last words?" Morrison asked. Elias looked at Thomas directly in the eyes with a gaze that pierced his soul. "Your wife had brown hair. Your daughter was named Emma. She was 5 years old. They begged for their lives and you burned them alive." Thomas closed his eyes, tears running down his weathered cheeks. "I did not want to, but you did it anyway." Absolute silence fell over the street. Morrison raised his hand into the air. "Aim!" 20 weapons rose in unison. Elias did not move. His hands hung at his sides, relaxed near his revolvers. "Prepare." The wind stopped blowing. The world held its breath. Fire. Morrison did not finish the order because Elias Cordell moved, and what happened in the next 5 seconds would be told for generations as the fastest and bloodiest duel in the history of the Old West. The ghost of blood had just awakened, and hell had just arrived in Dust Creek. Nobody saw exactly how it happened. One instant, Elias was motionless as a statue. The next, his hands were a blur of movement. The 2 Colts came out of their holsters with impossible speed for a man of his age. Bang! The first shot went to the left. Bang! The second to the right. 2 men fell before anyone could pull a trigger. Bull was the first to die, a bullet piercing his heart with surgical precision. Snake Dawson was the second, falling to his knees with a hole in his forehead, dead before he hit the ground. Elias moved, rolled to one side, while bullets began to fly through the air. The shots from the gunmen hit the ground where he had been standing just a second before, creating small explosions of dust. The old man slid behind a water barrel with practiced ease. Bang, bang, bang! 3 more shots, 3 more men fell, clutching their chests. His movements were precise, calculated with decades of experience. There was no hurry, no fear, only pure technique, muscle memory built over decades of killing. "Shoot him! Shoot him!" Morrison shouted desperately as he emptied his revolver towards the barrel. But Elias was a ghost, a phantom of death. He appeared, shot, disappeared again into the shadows and smoke. The gunmen were shooting at shadows while their companions fell one after another like dominoes. A man tried to flank him from the left. Elias turned, shot without looking directly at him. The man collapsed with a surprised expression frozen on his face. Another attacked from the right, same result. In 30 seconds, 10 men lay dead or dying in the street, their blood darkening the dust. Morrison retreated towards the saloon, reloading frantically, his hands shaking. He is the devil. He is the cursed devil himself. Thomas was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to shoot. He only watched as Elias advanced slowly, methodically, implacable, inevitable as death itself. The last 5 gunmen attempted a desperate charge. They ran towards Elias, screaming war cries. He did not run. He simply waited, calculated the trajectories, and shot with mechanical precision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all fell in a matter of seconds. The last cylinder of Elias was empty. The old man ejected the spent shells with calm and reloaded. His hands did not tremble even slightly, not a drop of sweat on his forehead, despite the carnage around him. Morrison was alone now, he and Thomas, and an old man who walked towards them like death personified. "This is not possible," Morrison whispered in terror. "It is not humanly possible." Elias stopped 20 paces away from them. 18 dead. 2 remain. Thomas fell to his knees on the blood-soaked ground. "Do it now, Elias. Finish this nightmare." But Morrison pulled out his last revolver and aimed, not at Elias, but at Thomas. "If I am going to die, I'm taking this traitor with me." And then everything moved again in slow motion. Morrison's shot thundered like lightning, splitting the sky. But Thomas was no longer there. Elias had moved with supernatural speed, pushing Thomas to the ground. The bullet whistled over their heads and crashed into the saloon wall behind them. Morrison shot again and again. Elias rolled, taking cover behind a wooden post. The bullet splintered the wood around him, sending splinters flying. He counted the shots mentally. 5, 6. Click. Morrison was left with an empty revolver. The gunman turned pale as death itself. He tried to run towards the saloon, but his legs would not respond. Fear nailed him to the ground like iron stakes. Elias stood up slowly, put away one of his revolvers, left the other hanging in his right hand, pointing at the ground. "It is over, Morrison. Wait, please." Morrison raised his hands in surrender. "We can negotiate this. I have gold. I have money hidden away. I can make you rich beyond your dreams. I do not want your money. Then what do you want from me?" "Justice." Morrison fell to his knees, tears streaming down his scarred face. "Please, I have a family. I have a small daughter in Kansas waiting for me." Elias stopped. His eyes darkened with old pain. "I also had a daughter once." The shot was clean and quick. Morrison fell backwards, his eyes open, staring at the sky he would never see again. Absolute silence fell over Dust Creek. Elias turned towards Thomas, who was still on the ground, sobbing like a child. "Stand up." Thomas got to his feet, trembling violently. "You are going to kill me anyway, right?" "Yes. Can I at least say something before I die?" Elias nodded slowly. Thomas took a deep breath, his voice breaking. "I am sorry. Every night of these 15 years, I have dreamed about your family, about their screams echoing in my mind. There is not a single day that I do not regret what we did, but I know that means nothing now. I know I deserve to die for what I did." Tears ran down his weathered face, cutting paths through the dust. "But it was not me who lit the fire. It was Morrison. I was young. I was afraid. He forced me to participate." Elias looked at him fixedly with those cold grey eyes. "I know." Thomas blinked, confused. "I know you did not light the fire. I know you were the youngest member of the gang. I know you were afraid. Then why are you here? Why have you come for me? Because you did not stop them. Because you fled like a coward. Because you chose your life over their lives." Elias raised the revolver slowly. "And now I choose." Thomas closed his eyes tightly, waiting for the shot that would end his miserable existence, but the shot never came. When he opened his eyes, Elias had lowered his weapon. "Go away. Go far from here and spend every remaining day trying to be better than the coward you were." Thomas could not believe what he was hearing. "Why? Why would you spare me?" "Because my wife would have wanted mercy, and I have killed enough men in her name already." Elias holstered his revolver and began to walk away slowly. Thomas fell to his knees, crying, and the ghost of blood disappeared into the dust of the dawn like a spirit returning to the shadows. Dust Creek slowly woke up after the massacre. The doors opened cautiously. Faces peered out, looking at the street turned into a cemetery. 18 bodies lay motionless, the blood darkening the earth beneath them. The county sheriff arrived 3 days later with 6 deputies. He took statements from the townspeople. Nobody saw anything, nobody heard anything, they all claimed. The old man had disappeared before noon. Widow McAllister found his room empty. Only one thing remained, the yellowed photograph on the bed with a note written on the back in firm handwriting. "Thank you for the coffee. May God bless you. E." Thomas Garrett was found in the church, praying in front of the altar. When the sheriff interrogated him, he only said, "Elias Cordell forgave me. Now I have to learn to forgive myself." He left town that same afternoon. They say he became a preacher in a small town in Colorado. He never touched a weapon again. In the following months, Dust Creek changed dramatically. Without Morrison and his gang, the people began to rebuild their lives. They elected a new mayor, hired an honest sheriff. Families walked the streets again without fear, but nobody forgot what happened that dawn. The children played on the main street, avoiding stepping on the places where the gunman had fallen. The mothers told the story in whispers to their daughters. The old men drank in the saloon and toasted in silence to the ghost who saved the town from tyranny. Elias Cordell became legend. Some swore they had seen him in other towns across the frontier. He always appeared where there was injustice. He always disappeared after the bad men fell. He never asked for a reward. He never said his name. 1 year later, a young gunman arrived in Dust Creek, asking about the ghost of blood. He wanted to challenge him. He wanted to be the man who killed the legend and made a name for himself. The bartender, an old man who had witnessed the duel, told him, "Boy, if you really want to find him, it will be because he is looking for you. And if he is looking for you, you are already a dead man walking." The young man laughed nervously. "Those are just stories for children." The bartender pointed to the 20 crosses in the cemetery on the hill. "Those are also stories." The young man turned pale and left town that same night, never to return. Somewhere in the desert, an old man rode alone under the stars that covered the night sky like diamonds. His revolvers hung heavy on his sides, constant reminders of who he was. His face was at peace for the first time in years, but his eyes remained alert, always watching the horizon. The revenge was complete, but justice never sleeps. And as long as there were bad men in the West, the ghost of blood would continue riding through the wilderness. 2 years passed since Dust Creek. The name Elias Cordell was whispered in saloons from Texas to California. Every town had a story about the mysterious old gunfighter. Every outlaw feared the shadow of an old man with 2 revolvers. But Elias was tired of the endless cycle of violence. He had cleaned 5 more towns after Dust Creek. He had killed 30 more men who terrorized innocent people. Each bullet he fired weighed more than the previous one. Each face of the dead added to the ghosts that visited him at night, haunting his dreams. Now he rode north, towards the mountains, where he had lived as a hermit before everything began anew. He wanted to return to solitude. He wanted to leave the weapons behind. He wanted to die in peace if peace was still possible for someone like him who had taken so many lives. He arrived at a small town called Redemption Creek. It was late, almost nightfall. He only sought a bed and food, nothing more. But fate had other plans for the old gunfighter. In the saloon, he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. 3 men were speaking in low voices, planning something terrible. They planned to assault an orphanage the following day. The woman who ran it had refused to sell them the land for their schemes. They planned to burn her alive with the children inside, just to send a message to others who might resist them. Elias felt his blood freeze in his veins. Not again. Not more children. He stood up from his table slowly. The three men looked at him with hostile eyes. "Do you have some problem, grandfather?" asked the leader, a thin type with gold teeth that gleamed in the lamplight. "Yes," Elias responded calmly. "You three are the problem." The men laughed loudly, thinking this old fool was no threat. One of them stood up, his hand moving towards his gun. "Foolish old man, you do not know who you are dealing with here." Elias looked at him with those empty eyes that had seen too much death. "Yes, I know exactly what you are, dead men." The man drew his revolver fast. He was quick, but Elias was faster, much faster. 3 shots, 3 bodies hitting the floor in less than 2 seconds. The saloon fell into absolute silence. The other patrons stared terrified at the old man, who had just killed 3 armed men before they could fire a single shot. Elias reloaded his revolvers with practiced calm, holstered them, and walked out without saying a word to anyone. Outside, under the stars, he leaned against a post. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from complete exhaustion of body and soul. "When does it end?" he whispered to the empty sky above. "When can I rest from this burden?" The wind did not respond to his desperate question, and Elias knew the truth deep in his heart. Men like him do not rest, not in this life. He mounted his horse and continued north towards the mountains, but in his heart he knew he would never truly arrive, because the West still needed him, and he had never learned how to say no to those who needed protection. Elias reached his old cabin in the mountains 3 days later. It was in ruins. The roof had collapsed under the weight of winter snows. The walls were eaten away by time and weather. Nature had reclaimed what had once been his refuge from the world. He sat on what remained of the porch, took out his revolvers, cleaned them slowly and methodically, as he had done 1,000 times before. Each movement was a ritual that connected him to his past. Each piece disassembled was a memory of faces and places. He thought about his wife, about his daughter, about all the men he had killed, about all the innocent people he had saved from evil men. Did it balance the scales? Did it mean anything in the end? He did not know the answer. He looked at his hands in the fading light. They were full of scars, stained with gunpowder and the passage of years, hands that had built a house with love, hands that had held his daughter, hands that had killed more than 100 men. What was he really? A hero, an assassin, a ghost trapped between life and death, unable to rest? The sun began to set, painting the mountains orange and purple, and then he heard the sound of horses approaching through the trees. He stood up slowly, his body protesting every movement. 6 riders emerged from the forest. They were Texas Rangers. The leader dismounted. He was an older man with a captain's badge gleaming on his chest. Elias Cordell. That depends on who is asking. "Captain William Thorpe, Texas Rangers. I do not do that kind of work anymore, Captain." Thorpe smiled sadly. "We did not come to hire you. We came to warn you. There is a bounty on your head. $10,000, alive or dead." Elias did not seem surprised by this news. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I was one of the children in that orphanage in Redemption Creek. 2 years ago, an old man killed 3 men who planned to burn us alive while we slept. I never knew his name until now." Silence fell between them. "I owe you my life," Thorpe continued. "So I came to warn you. Bounty hunters are coming this way. Dozens will arrive in 2 days seeking that reward. Let them come. You are going to fight an entire army alone." Elias looked at the horizon where the sun was setting. He smiled slightly. "I will not run. I have been running my entire life." Thorpe nodded, understanding that nothing he could say would change this man's mind. He mounted his horse. "Will you ever stop, Mr. Cordell?" Elias looked at his revolvers gleaming in the dying light. "When there is nobody left who needs to be stopped." The Rangers rode away into the sunset, and Elias Cordell, the ghost of blood, loaded his weapons and disappeared among the shadows of the mountains. Some legends never die. They only wait for the next call to action. 20 years later, the Old West was dying a slow death. Trains crossed the continent bringing civilization. Cities grew with brick buildings reaching towards the sky. Outlaws were hunted by modern law enforcement. The era of gunfighters was coming to an end. But in saloons, in camps, around campfires, one story continued to be told across the frontier. The story of an old man who could not die, who appeared wherever justice was needed. They say he appeared during the Silver City bank robbery, killing 8 bandits before vanishing into the smoke. They say he stopped a massacre in an Oklahoma town, facing alone a gang of 15 men. They say that in every place where injustice raised its ugly head, a shadow appeared with 2 Colt revolvers engraved with the initials EC. Some said he was immortal, others that he was a real ghost returned from the dead. The most rational thought it was several different men using the same name and legend. But nobody knew the truth. In 1903, a journalist from the East arrived in Dust Creek investigating the legend of the Ghost of Blood. He interviewed the survivors of that terrible day. They all told the same story. An old man of 70 who moved like the wind and shot like an avenging angel. The journalist found Widow McAllister, now a 90-year-old woman in a wheelchair. "Did you know him?" the journalist asked. The widow smiled with clouded eyes full of memories. "I knew him. He was a good man who did terrible things. Or a terrible man who did good things. I never knew which. Do you believe he is still alive after all these years?" The widow looked out the window towards the distant mountains. Men like Elias Cordell do not die. They become something greater than themselves. They become the idea that justice always finds a way, no matter how long it takes. The journalist published his article. It became a bestseller across the nation. The legend grew even larger. And somewhere in a cabin hidden among snow-covered mountains, a very old man cleaned 2 rusty revolvers with practiced care. His hair was completely white as winter snow. His face was marked by a century of life lived, but his eyes were still the same. Cold, alert, seemingly immortal. Outside, the wind howled through the peaks. And Elias Cordell smiled slightly, because as long as evil existed in the world, he would be there, silent, waiting, eternal, ready to answer when justice called his name once more. The legend of the Ghost of Blood would never die because some men become more than flesh and bone. They become symbols, ideas that transcend mortality itself. And in the hearts of those who remembered, Elias Cordell would ride forever through the endless desert, 2 revolvers at his sides, protecting the innocent, punishing the guilty, a phantom of justice in a land that desperately needed heroes, even if those heroes were haunted by the ghosts of every life they had taken in the name of righteousness. The Old West was dying, but its legends would live forever in the stories told around campfires, in the whispers of frightened outlaws, in the hopes of those who prayed for a savior when darkness descended upon their towns. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind blows through empty streets, people swear they can still hear the sound of spurs clinking, the creak of leather holsters, and the distant thunder of gunshots that echo through time itself, reminding everyone that the Ghost of Blood still rides, still watches, still protects those who cannot protect themselves from the evil that lurks in the hearts of desperate and wicked men.